Okay. Good thing I didn't say anything embarrassing out loud. I said plenty of stuff in my head. This is a absolutely shocking turnout for a talk about women in games. So, my God, please give yourselves all a hand. This may be a record. I was looking down, having a nice fight with my computer, and there was basically, I made my mother-in-law come to the talk, and then I saw Owen, and I grabbed him and said, "You're coming, right?" So I had at least 2 people, and when I looked up, it was like, holy cow, the room's almost full. That's exciting. So anyway, this is a talk, and yeah, you know what? It is absolutely a narcissistic talk, because it's about a girl, which was me, and a woman, which is still me, and a mother, which is still me. Sometimes we append other words to the word mother, but hopefully you'll see yourself somewhere in this talk. And so without any further ado, let me start my timer. I should also give a warning to you guys, for which I apologize consistently and attempt regularly to correct. I'm originally from New York, and I have 4 shots of espresso every morning. So I'm trying to talk slowly right now. It will ramp as we go through, and so that I'll be nearly airborne by the time I finish speaking. So in advance, I apologize for speaking as fast as I do. All right, so anyway, it's been an interesting time to be in games, to say the least. And this last little while, more than any other time in my career, I've been asked what it's like to be a woman in games. I've been asked about it in interviews, and I've been asked about it at conferences very regularly, not this one, but I've been asked to talk about it at tons of conferences that have nothing to do necessarily with being a woman in games, right? But I get asked to talk about it, and I get asked about it tons in casual conversation, in hundreds and hundreds of conversations behind the scenes. And I've talked about it from time to time in small ways here and there. But truth be told, until the last few years, I've really never given much thought to what it means to be a woman in games, because I never show up and say, "Excuse me, this part of my body that is definitely female, what is your design opinion on something?" Because they don't care, right? They don't care about games. And for me, I'm just a game designer. And the reality is obviously I have been a girl, a mother, and a woman in games. And I have likewise been influenced by my own girls, my mother, my mother-in-law, and all the women who came before me in this industry. And I think that's true for many of us, right? That we come into this industry and we are a mirror in some sense, or we see other people as a mirror of ourselves, something that we want to be when we get in the industry, and in turn we are influenced by them. And it's my hope that you see yourself in this talk. So this is little me. I was 5 when I started making games. And we didn't have any money in our family, so my mother would bring us around to garage sales. For those of you who aren't familiar with this bizarre phenomena, in the States, on the weekends, for reasons that I'm unclear on, we take everything we don't want and we throw it on the lawn and make it for sale. And people come by and get our junk, and then we go get their junk. It's a weird thing. But my mother, what she would do is she would give me 10 cents. And that's what I'd get to spend. And with 10 cents, I could usually buy board games that didn't have all their pieces. So as a result, this was my game collection growing up. And I would take these pieces and I would turn them into other games, and I loved it. So I made tons and tons of board games when I was a little kid. I wish I had saved them. I didn't. But it was a blast anyway. And then the magic happened. When I was 11, for reasons that I'm still unclear on and never asked her, my very Catholic mother got me this game. Now, in fairness, I don't think she knew what she was doing, but man, I cannot understate the love affair that I had with this game, because I was someone who didn't really fit in with any concept of traditional sports or traditional, I didn't want to play with Barbies, I wanted to play with greater demons, right? So I could create worlds. And it was amazing to me. And so I was basically also finished going outside. And I think in a sense, this is why I was so blown away by Stranger Things, because I am every one of those kids. Like, I was the nerd who didn't fit in. I was unpopular. I was chubby, right? I had a perpetual bad hair day. So all of these people were me. And they actually got to go on adventures I wanted to go on. Like, that would have been really cool to get to do what those guys did. And if you haven't watched the show, join the rest of all game developers and watch it. It'll be in one go. You'll watch every single one of them. We tried to space it out. It was a failure. Anyway, when I was 14, I got Rollmaster. And Rollmaster, to me, was amazing. It was sort of the next iteration of D&D. And there were certain rules for encumbrance. These are not actually the rules for encumbrance, but what it meant, what encumbrance is, if you don't know, It means if I'm carrying 5 pieces of armor, I'm going to walk more slowly. It's going to affect the things that I do. So I decided to modify the rules of encumbrance. Well, unbeknownst to me, this was going to break every other system in the game, as so happens whenever you change one system. So I rewrote the entire thing, and when I was 14, me and my friends would play this game called, we end up calling it Brenda Law. I also chucked that, which I regret. And I still wish I had it. So in 1981, I had my job interview for the game industry here, not exactly in that bathroom. And for those of you who think, haha, I know exactly what kind of person you are, you're wrong and your mind's in the gutter. What my interview was, I was walking into the bathroom. I grew up under a snowbank in northern New York. And I smoked at the time. I was 15, so don't smoke. I wasn't a good kid, all these other things. But walking into the bathroom, there was a girl in there who didn't have a cigarette. And I could tell she wanted one, and she was looking for a non-menthol. So I walked up to her, and I handed her one. And to be polite, she said, "Do you have a job?" "No." "Have you ever heard of Surtech?" "Nope." "You ever heard of Wizardry?" "Nope." "You ever heard of D&D?" "Yes." I was a hardcore player. And that was my interview, and I started the following Tuesday. So good. I don't think this interview's happen anymore. But I started the following Tuesday. I was there for 20 years, believe it or not. So this was the first game I worked on, Wizardry 1. These were state-of-the-art graphics at the time. It was amazing. And my mother was super proud of me that I had this job, and she really felt that I was at the forefront of technology. And being that it was 1981, I was. And I mentioned earlier on, we didn't have any money when I was growing up. And so for me to work at Surtech and to have access to all kinds of games and all kinds of computers, man, it gave me such a start that I could not have otherwise possibly had. I absolutely fell in love with coding, and I still love coding, but I mean, it was obsessive for me. If I had to do it more than 2 times, I would code it. And I guess in a sense, to me, code still feels like this digital version of game pieces. Like if I can build anything with it. It was Legos, I don't know, squared. I convinced my high school actually to offer a programming class, which I then quit because I got a job at Surtech. So we ended up releasing a lot of games during those years. These are just some of the first ones. Put myself through college, selling 5 1/4-inch discs, believe it or not, and still working at Surtech. And even though obviously this whole time, like, you know, I'm a woman or I'm a girl, I would still say at this point in time, working in games, I never noticed and never thought of myself as a woman in a man's world because Surtech at the time, believe it or not, was mostly women. So this is a picture taken just before I joined the company. I'm not pictured here, but once I get there, we're half women in the company. And it winnows down so that there's 2 of us. I'm cleverly hiding in the back there. And so there's just 2 of us there. And although the demographics of my work environment change from half to me in much, much larger teams, I was used to it, right? It didn't seem abnormal to be surrounded completely by guys. It felt very comfortable to me. And weirdly enough, in 2010, I joined a web app company called Slide. And it felt bizarre because there were a ton of women in the company. And it felt really weird to be surrounded by so many women. It was a very different experience for me. Not a bad one. It wasn't like, ooh, get away, right? But it was really, truly different. I had never worked in a situation where I was working with many, many other women. And even during this time, I'm still thinking about myself as a game designer. And this is they don't really have a gender neutral icon, guys, so just pretend that's, I wasn't really thinking about my gender at all. And it felt to me then that games, in the early 90s specifically, it was much more about the game and not necessarily the gender or the type of game that it was. And I really didn't give any thought to whether I could be a woman in a game, or if the story involved women, or if there were female NPCs, or if a female developed the game. It's just not something I was thinking about. And then around the late 90s, why did I pick this picture? We don't know. Around the late 90s, right, this just sort of summed up the late 90s for me, I guess, I first started hearing this fascinating question. What's it like to be a female game designer? Now, first of all, as if I've got another perspective, right? And I also don't feel I always felt like one of the gang, but suddenly as somebody's saying, you're no longer part of the gang, you go over here and we would like to ask you why you're different. And then, what's it like to be a woman in games? As if, I get to speak on behalf of all women. We have one opinion from all cultures, and I will be delivering that opinion. Not really like, please don't take that seriously. That's utter garbage, right? There's tons of different opinions. And I've known women in the game industry, like, say, Amy Hennig. She was on a number one reason to be panel with me. And Amy's had an amazing time in the game industry. And she will tell you her experience has been overwhelmingly positive. She's loved it. Come on in. And, that's true of a lot of people, right? And then I've also heard stories from other women that are shocking and surprising. I myself have had a largely great experience. I have not really experienced anything nearly as horrific as some of the stories I've heard, but I've had some interesting moments. Like I remember this one time I was talking to this industry giant, and I will not name the giant, but if you've ever talked to somebody really famous in games that you deeply admired, like to the point that you're like, my God, I wonder if anybody else see that I'm talking to this person. Please take a photo. Right, if you've ever had that moment, this was my moment. And so I was super excited that I was talking to him because he made the type of games that I really loved. And when he's sitting there, it helps. I'll do. So here's how the conversation actually goes. So this is Mr. Game Developer, and he's sitting here like this, and he's like that, and then he moves his coat. All right. So when he moved his coat, it was really obvious that there was something else there, right? And so I remember thinking what do I do, right? And I truly did not know what to do, but this is how it changes. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. And being a game developer, I'm completely socially unprepared for situations like this, right? So I truly didn't even know what to say, and all I could think about is like, Jesus, there's this thing, right? So I don't remember what I said, but I didn't obviously say, oh yes, I'll help you with your obvious giant erection, right? Like, those are words you weren't expecting to hear today, I bet. Anyway, so I don't know necessarily what to say, but as we're walking through the conference, all I could think about is like, everybody, stay back from this guy because he's like sprung. It's my mother-in-law's here, horrified, by the way. Anyway, and then there's other questions that come, like, what would you say to other women who wanted to be in games? Well, Owen, what would you say to guys who want to break into games? Good job, Owen. So but it's bizarre, and would you join our Women in Games panel? Would you be our diversity speaker? And so it ends up that it's all about my gender and nothing about my work. And I actually gave a name to this called the female tax, right? So it's the amount that I have to talk about my work. I have to talk about my work even more because so much of my work is actually me talking about my gender, which I'm not trying to promote. I don't give a shit that I'm a woman, right? I do deeply give a shit about my work. And it's not just in video games that this happens. So, other people are tired of talking about the black experience or being gay. And even people who are asking questions say at the Oscars, somebody is you could talk about your film, but what are you wearing? And I think it hit its peak with Amal Clooney. So she was at the European Court of Human Rights, and she was arguing the appeal of the genocide of 1.5 million people. And she was asked by a reporter, unbelievably, who are you wearing? What? Those are her robes, right? What if somebody had asked her, what can we do to change the world too? Any question that wasn't, what are you wearing? So now that's not to say that I don't applaud, because I do applaud the efforts to diversify conferences and events and companies. But it would be fantastic if instead of putting these people on one single panel, we spread them out throughout the conference so that they were speaking about more than just their gender or their sexuality or the color of their skin. And that's not to say that it's not important, because it is. But at the same time, I believe that we are more than those things. I don't want to die. It's what was she? Oh, she was a woman? Thanks. Right? I want to be something more than that. And I also think it can't be our sole focus to the exclusion of other things. In my time in the industry, I've gone from there being literally no female characters in digital games to hypersexualized characters to you better have a female character in your game. And I think we really need to focus on having the right character in our video games. And that right character might be a woman, and she might not. For instance, I think Monica Bellucci could have played an amazing Tony. I have no doubt about it. But this is the guy who had to play that role. I know that. And likewise, the cast of Stranger Things, these guys were absolutely who they needed to be. And as game developers, we know that because I think we identify with them. I think these three guys could have been the cast of Stranger Things, and maybe they would have really rolled great D10s, but I wouldn't have believed it. And to the exact extent that we lose control of our character, we lose control of the story. And so my next game, in fact, features a male character lead because it's what's right for the story. But I think that what we need to do is expand the amount of stories that are told so that they feature many more people. Like, absolutely, these are some of my favorite games. So Her Story, if you haven't played it, absolutely genius. And expanding stories like Gone Home, or expanding stories like The Incomparable Life is Strange. And if, for God's sakes, this is horrifying, but if, for God's sakes, you offer the option, how many of you know what the glabella is, just out of curiosity? None of you, right? Of course, nobody does, but it's up there. This is your glabella. And if you can adjust your glabella in a video game, you better give my brown son, who has curly hair, more than 2 hairstyles that include afro or cornrows. Come on, right? Like, if you can customize characters in games, give people those options. And so ultimately, although I could not see it before, I think we do all want to see ourselves in the game and in the game industry. And we need role models, and we need the stories of those role models to inspire us. And we get those stories no matter where they're found, whether it's real life, books, movies, or games. And now I mentioned that I got into the game industry in 1981. So Gary Gygax would have been he would have been like my superhero geek. But my real role model was undoubtedly my mother, for the reasons I'll go into. So she was a woman of the 50s. When she married my dad, they settled into a normal life for a time. That's little baby me before I had D10s. And that's my dad. So my dad passes away when I'm 4. And left my mom, who's completely unprepared for this, as anybody would be, right? With just us kids. And so the reality is I never saw anything other than a woman who could do it all. She raised a family. She put us through college. She was a sole breadwinner. And I never knew anything different, so I just assumed I could do it all too. And so I have never, not once, considered limits on my gender, like I can't do this because I'm a woman. And when I was growing up, women were the primary breadwinners. They had careers and children. They were also the strong ones. And women were basically the best thing ever. My sister, who's 19 years older than I am, she was the head of a cardiac rehab unit. My niece, she has her master's in literacy and works with at-risk kids. And even my brother, who paved the way by saying, "Mom, I want to grow up and be a rock star," which made game designer sound realistic. Anyway, his longtime girlfriend, who I can't name because I've been asked not to name her, his longtime girlfriend went on to become a federal attorney general, and she works in the Department of Homeland Security in the States. Hence why I can't name her. But I never had this concept of women should, or women could not, or it's only a woman's job, or men do this. And so years later, when I found myself pregnant, I decided that I did want the old-fashioned version, though, right? Like I wanted somebody to stay home with the kids. And so I decided it was a matter of math. So my husband at the time, I made X. He made less than X, so he stayed home with the kids. And that's exactly how it works. Now, he wasn't thrilled about this at all, but that's what we did. And I would like to say that it's all been rosy, but it hasn't. So in some respects, I have felt like a pioneer woman in the game industry a little bit. In every company that I was at, I pioneered the maternity policy. I created nursing rooms when I was there. And I remember when I was horrifyingly pregnant with twins. It's the only way to be pregnant with twins. You're just as big as a house. And I remember this guy, like I was out of the office for a day, and they came up with a policy for how they're going to handle when I give birth. And they decided that at the 8.5 month, I would be leaving the company because I wouldn't be able to handle it anymore. And so they had made all these plans when I wasn't there. And so I let them know that I was not expected to die from this condition I had. Like I was expected to recover. In fact, I was going to be losing a spontaneous ton of weight. And I've even done silly things, like it'll be silliest and obvious to any game developer. I've planned my births around games shipping. But games are games, man, and babies are going to ship on time. So in every case, the babies shipped before the games. And, talking about babies, I remember when my daughter, Mesa, was 7, and she heard this line at school, because she was really into this game, she's talking about it. She hears this line at school, and this guy says to her, girls don't play games. And so she did. I was so proud of her for this. She said, "My mommy makes them," and walked away. And I was like, yes, it's my girl. Isn't that great? And so, but there's been other weird stuff. Like I've seen it in my career, and this just recently happened to me. Not this one, but it just recently happened to me as well. Like So what? It's like, did I lose my whole career? Like, really? Like, John Romero's wife? Like, just my mother-in-law would cover her ears. Just fuck off, right? Did I give you time to cover your ears? Okay, good. All right. So this brings me back really just sort of to the firestorm at the beginning. As an industry, I think we've collectively, all of us, not people who are just women, right? Not people who are just others. We have we're facing our biggest thing now, which is, anonymous online harassment. People have been threatened, their lives have been threatened. I have received many exciting and colorful tweets, where the spelling is missing, unfortunately, on some of them. So, John won't snap my neck. He'll kill me easily in deathmatch, but he won't do that. But he will teach people how to spell for free. Ultimately, the reality is, for me, the noise doesn't matter, and it can't matter, and I can shut these things out. It feels incredibly important to do things that do shut that out, because ultimately I believe it'll pass. I can choose to shut the door on it. And my goal ultimately is not to inspire these eggs, right? The nameless, faceless hordes on the internet. Like, I don't care. I can't change their mind. It's like arguing with a drunk. And I would rather be to my daughter and to other women in the game industry what my mother was to me. For Mother's Day a few years ago, she's 15 now. I think she was 11 when she gave me this. And she's just a little, she's a little kid. But here's what it said in the book. This like kills me every time I see this. Right, so her dream was to make a game with me, which if you're a mom or a dad and a game developer, like right there, that's the best review you can ever get, right? And so when I saw that, I have this book up on my shelf in the office. No matter if we move an office, I move my desk, that book goes with me. And so it's that I feel very called to do, that I want to do what I can do to make this a good industry for her, for my son, for all the kids, for all the people coming up into this industry. And it's why when I got an award at 2015's GDC, that I called my family up on stage, because they're the ones who don't eat dinner with me. They're the ones who say, no, we totally get it, Mom. Or they're the ones who say, are you in beta? They're the ones who ask me how the milestones went. They're the ones who unbelievably tell me that getting their school supplies is a P1 bug, and that I need to get it done right away. And they are the reason ultimately that I am who I am. And I need to pay forward what was shown to me, like these absolute rock stars of game development, like Donna Bailey, who was the coder on Centipede, or Roberta Williams, and everybody knows what she did, or Danny Barry, who was so far, she was light years ahead of the industry, even at her time, one of the best game developers that's ever lived. She's deceased now. Or Margot Comstock, who really created games journalism. Or my dear friend Laura Lynn McWilliams, who's worked in pretty much every genre. She's one of the best game designers I know. And Sherry Grainer-Ray, who literally wrote the book on gender-inclusive game design. Or this kid, Mesa, who shipped 3 months before the game did. Anyway, she's the same kid who gave me this book, and this is her now. And this summer, we actually started working on that game together that I'm not supposed to cry about. I'm choking up, I need a drink. And we just started working on that game, and it's her design totally, and man, it's a dream come true. This is going to be the best game that I ever worked on. And I know, like, these things matter. Our stories as game developers matter, and that we do need role models, and we need the stories that they have to tell. So please tell your story. Thank you. Whew.